Hey guys, Sean from Note Cycles. Today we are going to be installing Soundstream's brand new WHD14 Plus into our 2016 Street Glide. The WHD14 Plus is absolutely jam-packed with features like wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The Soundstream Reserve WHD14 Plus works with a variety of engine tuners, including the ThunderMax and the Power Vision. The WHD14 Plus is not compatible with the Boom amplified factory Harley audio system. It is necessary to have the hand control module to both maintain your hand controls as well as turn the unit on. If you're upgrading from the Soundstream Reserve HDHU14, you can use the hand control modules that you already have. If you have another aftermarket radio, you will need to select the hand control modules at checkout. The install is essentially exactly the same for the previous wired version, the HDHU14 Plus. The factory USB will still continue to work. So some of the technical specs on the new WHD14 Plus: IPX5 rated for water intrusion, a 7-inch optically bonded capacitive touchscreen, a 2-ohm stable Class D internal amplifier, as well as a 13-band per channel graphic equalizer and active crossovers. It also has 5-volt RCA pre-outs, as well as an input for a rear view camera. The Soundstream WHD14 Plus is the ultimate audio upgrade for your Harley-Davidson touring motorcycles. It blends style, durability, and technology into one. So let's go over some of the tools necessary to install our new head unit. And remember, doesn't matter if you're replacing the factory head unit or an older aftermarket head unit, the removal process will be the same. First, we have some wire ties and a pair of side cutters, panel removal tool, a T27 and T25 Torx, as well as a 3/16 Allen. Now remember, your hardware may be different, so check over your bike before beginning the installation to make sure you have all the tools necessary to complete it. And with that being said, let's get to the disassembly of our bike. So now it's time to go ahead and remove the front fairing. You're gonna have 7 total T27 fasteners. My personal preference, I remove the 2 outers, loosen the middle, hold that to the very end, remove that, and then remove the fairing. So let's go ahead, start removing the outside fairing. Move that one. Now I'm gonna just loosen this up a little bit, but that's still on. So now we have these loosened. We have 4 T27s on the inside of the fairing, so let's go ahead and get those 4 removed. Okay, these 2 are removed. Let's go ahead and to the other side, get those 2 removed. So now that we removed our 4 T27 fasteners from the inside of the fairing, we can come back to the front. So you want to get it most of the way loosened up. Remove your windscreen, set that in a safe place. So here's where you want to be careful. You want to make sure you have a hold of the front part of the fairing, and then finish taking this bolt all the way out, and then we'll just pop it off. Now there is one connector that we need to disconnect, that's the headlight, and we do that by just pushing up on the pin and pulling out. So now you're going to want to put your fairing in a safe place, put it on a towel, a blanket, workbench. So once our front fairing is removed, we have access to almost everything on the inside. There's a couple pieces we're gonna need to take off to get our factory radio out. We're gonna need to take off our fresh air vent. We're gonna need to take off our center radio brace, and then we'll remove the bolts as well as all of the connectors here and to our gauges. So we'll start first with the fresh air vent, move on to the gauges, and then we'll move on to getting all the bolts out of the brace. So again, this is going to be a T27 to remove, and then that will slide out. So let's get this all removed. And this one. So we have our two there, and this will just slide straight towards the front of the bike. Set that somewhere safe. So next, we're going to grab our panel removal tool, remove the two Christmas trees on either side. Then we're also going to remove the clips from our 3 gauges. So let's get that done. So doing that, we're just going to kind of get it just inside here and pry towards the front of the bike. So now that we have our Christmas trees removed, we need to remove the 3 harnesses from our gauges. So you can use the panel removal tool that you had. You can use a flathead screwdriver, anything like that. The biggest thing is you just need to slip it behind and just gently pry out. Don't want to be too forceful because you can break the plastic. So just kind of get it in there, remove it. Same on this side, just kind of gently get it in. And then we're actually gonna go ahead and drop that down so it's out of our way. So now with that out of the way, we have a couple of screws that we need to remove. We will have either 2 or 4 on the side. Ours has 2. We're gonna have 4 bolts holding in the brace to the radio itself, as well as we're gonna have a bolt here and a bolt here holding in towards the front of the fairing, and then we'll have one holding in the speedometer and the tachometer. And one last one that is down here. Now that actually keeps the pocket in line and allowing it to open and close. So we'll remove that one too. So these are, on my bike, these are all a T25, so we can get those removed. And I'll show you how to do that now. So I've got my T25. I like to start in the back, so we'll just go ahead and get the speedometer and tachometer out. Then we'll remove the 2 on the sides. Go ahead and get this one out here. Set those aside for safekeeping. So then I'll move to this one here. It's kind of hidden underneath. It's a silver screw of mine. So grab that one. Set that to the side. So now we have our 2 that are attached to the pods and our 4 that attach the radio. So we'll go ahead and grab the 2 that are attached to the pods first. So there's 1. And 2. Now we have the 4 that are attached to the radio. So go ahead and remove each one of those. Now, once you take this last one out, be very careful because your gauge cluster could begin to fall out. So you want to make sure that you have kind of a handle on everything before you start pulling it out, because it will fall. And just remember, on reassembly, your gauge cluster will go in prior to this plate. So just keep that in mind. Set this somewhere safe. And then we can go ahead and actually slide off our brace. So now that our brace is off, we can go ahead and start unplugging all of our factory connectors. And then we can move to grabbing our 3/16 Allen and removing the 4 bolts that hold our factory radio to the chassis of the bike. So next step, we're gonna go ahead and unplug all of our factory connectors. Start with our main connector. So there's a little push button right in front of the handle or the lock. So you push that in, slide it towards the back of the radio, and then release. Now, depending on your bike, you may have an additional plug plugged in. Just make sure that everything is unplugged. So next is our factory USB. Again, there's a little push pin on top. Right here, you're just gonna push that in and wiggle it off. Our antenna, now we have an aftermarket antenna, but the factory is exactly the same. That push pin is gonna be on the bottom. So we're gonna push it from the bottom and slide it off. So right here is that one. And last but not least is our factory GPS antenna. Same as the antenna, it's on the bottom. So you just kind of need to push that in and slide it off. So there's its little push pin right there. So I'm going to set our GPS antenna aside so we don't lose it. Now all of our harnesses have been disconnected from our factory radio. We can go ahead and grab our Allen wrench to remove the 4 bolts, actually physically holding it into the radio. Now this is the same whether you have a factory radio or an aftermarket radio, so just keep that in mind. But let's go ahead and get those removed. So first, start here. So you want to just make sure you grab it kind of everything together. And keep a hold of it and just slide that factory radio right out. Now it's time to go ahead and get our new Soundstream Reserve installed into our bike. So just like you removed your factory or aftermarket radio, take it, slide it in, and you're going to want to make sure you line up all 4 holes, and then you can get at least 1 or 2 started by hand, and then you can just a couple turns with the 3/16 just to make sure it holds in there. Now you don't want to tighten this all the way down until you have all of them in and started, because what you're going to do is to make sure it seats nicely against the fairing, just going to give it a little push, just kind of hold it in place, and then go ahead and finish tightening all your bolts down. Once you get the back two, you're usually pretty good. You don't have to hold it anymore. Now that our radio is installed and tightened down, we can go ahead, grab our harness, our Bluetooth microphone, and our GPS antenna, get all that stuff plugged in, and I can show you that next. It's time to get to wiring. First, you're going to want to grab your power harness, get that plugged in. Then we'll move on to the Bluetooth microphone. You can install this or not. It is 100% up to you. And then we have our GPS antenna that helps us with the wireless CarPlay aspect of the radio. Then we'll go through, plug in our factory USB, our antenna, and then we'll give it a listen, make sure everything works, and then we can start the reassembly process. So let's go ahead and get everything plugged in and go from there. First thing you're going to want to do, make sure you have the harness, make sure you have your handlebar controls plugged in. If you do not have this, the radio will not power on. So make sure you have this and it's plugged in correctly. It's a 14-pin plug and a 12-pin plug. Just make sure they're plugged in to the correct side. So we're going to go ahead, get our head unit side plugged in, just line it up, close it, and we're going to find our factory side, make sure our pins are correct, line those up, and lock them in. So now they're nice and locked in. If you're going to go ahead and run your Bluetooth microphone, you're going to go ahead, plug it in to the 1/8" mini jack, make sure you hear that click, and then run it however you would like. Again, I'm not going to run it, so I'm going to keep that off. Next, we have our GPS antenna. There is a blue port at the bottom of the radio. Just line it up, plug it in, make sure it doesn't unplug, and then you can run that and double side tape it or Velcro it to the top of the radio once we get everything else back on. From there, we're going to go ahead, grab our factory USB, get that plugged in, make sure we hear that click, and then our antenna into the antenna port, get that plugged in. So now we have everything plugged in that we're currently going to use. We're not going to be running any aftermarket amps right now, so we're going to go ahead and leave those caps on there. Got everything plugged in. Just want to go to the front of the bike, turn it on, check my handlebar controls, make sure I get some kind of noise or static, and just make sure I did everything right. So let's go ahead, turn the bike on. Radio lights up. I see my Soundstream Reserve logo. I hear FM radio, volume up, volume down. I have my source changing. That's perfect. Let's see here. I have my mute. And I have my track up and down. Looks like everything works. Super excited about that. So now we can go ahead and start reassembling the bike. So to begin with reassembly, it's just a reverse process of removing the radio. I'll start with my top plate and my speedo and my tack, get that all set up. So we'll kind of get that laid in there. Now you want to make sure you have at least one of the bolts to hold your speedo and tack in. So kind of get that in there, get that just started by hand, that T25, so it doesn't fall out. Then you're going to slide that into place, And you're going to grab your screws that you use to remove all of these. So let's grab those. So we have our screws. So we're going to go ahead and start with this one. Just get that one tightened up all the way in, just so nothing happens to that. We can then start with either the sides or here, doesn't really matter. But you're going to want to start all of these by hand. Get them going in. Again, we only have 2 of them. Some will have 4. So those 2 are started. There's the one that helps hold the pocket here. We can get that one started. Now you don't want to tighten them all 100% down right now, because we still may have to move it a little bit to line up all 4 holes that hold it to the top of the aftermarket radio. So get that halfway in. Get that one halfway in. So now we still have the ability to kind of move it around and adjust it. So we're going to grab these 4 bolts, get them started by hand, and then we can go ahead and tighten them all up. So we have our 4 bolts for the top. Just take one at a time, maneuver it into position, start them by hand, just so we don't strip them out. So now we have all our bolts ready to go. Go ahead and just start tightening them down one by one. Those 4 tight. Do the side here. Go ahead, grab the other side. We'll go ahead and grab the one that the pocket's held on by. So now our pocket's nice and tight, and now we can go ahead and do the 2 on either side of the speedo or the tack. Now that all those are tightened down, we can start doing a little bit of cleanup of our wiring and getting our plugs plugged back in. So we'll go ahead and plug everything back in first, just like they came out. Just plug them straight in. As well as you can go ahead and go in and plug in all of your wire retainers. Just replace anything that you've pulled out. Okay, so now we got everything plugged back in. It's time to do a little bit of wire maintenance. So we have our GPS antenna that we need to mount. If you don't have an aftermarket amplifier, it's a fine place just to put it right on top. Go ahead and take care of any of our wiring that we're not going to need or use. Go ahead and get that all hidden away. And then we will go grab a couple wire ties, get everything wire tied up, and run our antenna. And then we can go ahead and get our front fairing back on. So as far as cleaning up your wiring, it depends on what you actually have in there. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but in my case, I can just go ahead and wire tie the aftermarket harness up to get it out of the way. Go ahead and put a wire tie on my handlebar control harness, just to keep that out of the way and together. Good. Clip any extra off. So now all that I really have left hanging anywhere is my headlight harness and then my Bluetooth microphone and backup camera stuff. So that I can just set to the side. Once you get everything wire tied, we have one last piece that we need to put in. That's the fresh air inlet. So we're gonna go ahead, grab that, get that mounted and bolted in, and then we can run our antenna. When mounting this, just be careful of how hard you push to slide it in. There are little guides to get it slid in. Just make sure it's snug and flush up to the inside of the fairing. Grab your 2 bolts. Get those tightened down. Now that's tightened down, we can go ahead and get our antenna run. So now that everything's run and plugged in, we can go ahead, grab our front fairing, plug our headlight in, and get it remounted. So we've checked our radio to confirm all operations are good. So now we can go ahead and get our headlight plugged back in and get everything mounted back up. So you want to grab your 3 bolts that hold on the windscreen of the front fairing. Grab your front fairing. Get that headlight plugged in. Make sure we get that plugged in correctly. Then we'll go ahead, place our fairing. Now we have 2 different size bolts. We have a longer one and 2 shorter. The longer one will go in the middle, and the shorter ones will go on the outside. So you want to start all those by hand. Just get them in a turn or 2, because next we're going to slide our windscreen down in. Then we're going to go ahead and grab our windscreen, slide gently and carefully, slide that in. There we go. Just give it a couple more little turns, just make sure that's not going to fall out. Make sure this is lined up correctly. There we go. So we're going to move to the inside. Remember, there are 2 different size bolts for the inner part of the fairing. The longer bolt will go up top. The shorter bolt will go down below. So let's grab those and get those tightened in. So 2 size bolts, 1 longer, 1 shorter. Again, longer one will go up top, shorter one will go down low. Get these 2 in. Now we'll go ahead, tighten up the top. Now that all our fairing bolts are tight, We can go ahead, give one last test to the radio and just make sure everything's exactly how it should be. Now we're on the bike. Let's check it one last time. Let's connect our phone and go through some of the features. Super bright display. Go to the home button. Let's go ahead and connect Apple CarPlay. So let's connect Bluetooth. So confirm our pairing request. So now when we get to this point, it will ask to connect to CarPlay. Tap connect. So now we're connected. Tap CarPlay. So now we have our wireless CarPlay. No wires, we can do whatever we want. So let's see what we should start with. So we can go to Spotify. And then so we got CarPlay all hooked up. I was on Spotify. I was able to play some music. I can go into Waze, see what we want to do. Don't want to drive home yet. We can make phone calls. We can go through all of our different settings. So there's your multi-screen, swipe. You have phone, music, maps, messaging, now playing, the Soundstream app, podcasts, Apple Music, audiobooks, the calendar, and all of the rest of my icons. That's pretty awesome. So let's see if we go home and go to the equalizer. We have a digital equalizer where we can adjust what we want to add into our system. So now that will all be done by your personal preference. So that is 100% up to you. Let's see if we go into settings here. Let's go into the audio settings. We have our balance and fade, our digital equalizer, our digital crossover, our subwoofer setup, our amp turn on delay, and our volume settings. So since we only have front speakers on this bike, doesn't make much sense. We can check the right speaker, yes, and the left speaker, yes, works fine. So we can back up out of that, go into that digital equalizer that I just showed you. And again, you can adjust that however you like. From there, we have digital crossover. So you can turn on some of the frequencies. So right now, 60 hertz, 80 hertz, 100 hertz, again, depending on what speakers you have. If you have amplifiers, you're going to get more involved with that. From there, we have subwoofer setup. We do not have subwoofers on here, but if you did, you can actually turn on the subwoofer output. You can turn up the non-fading pre-out up and down right from the head unit. You can set your subwoofer crossovers as well as your phase. From there, we have amp turn-on delay, which will, once you start your bike, it'll actually delay the turn-on of your amplifiers for up to a couple seconds, so you don't get any pop or cracking when they turn on. Lastly is the volume settings. So you can do two things in here. You can level adjust the volume of all of your sources. So if you tap that, you can go into radio, turn radio down a little bit, but turn USB up, so on and so forth. And then you have your maximum volume adjustment. So if you are allowing somebody to ride your bike, but you don't want them to blow your speakers, you can actually go in there and turn it down to 30, and that would be their maximum volume. Back to our settings, we can go to our display settings. We can set our nighttime brightness. Set our nighttime brightness, turn it up and down. Our touch key color, so you can either leave it auto changing, where it will roll through all the different colors it has, or you can shut that off and just change it to have one color at a time. So we'll put it on orange for now. And then the background wallpaper, that will give you a quick selection of some preloaded backgrounds. You can always load in your own via USB in a JPEG format. From there, we have our Bluetooth settings. Now that's where we had to go to connect our phone Bluetooth for wireless Apple CarPlay. If you're not using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto and just want to connect Bluetooth, you'll go in there and set up your Bluetooth just as I did with my Apple CarPlay. So from there, I'm pretty happy with how it looks in the bike. I'm pretty happy with how it sounds on the bike. I'm super excited that I now have wireless Apple CarPlay on my Street Glide. They absolutely knocked it out of the park with the Soundstream Reserve WHD14 Super bright display, gives me all of the features I want. I'm super excited to get out on the road and take a ride. So with that, if you have any questions or are looking to purchase this head unit, please visit us at nodecycles.com. And as always, guys, have a blast out there.